Welcome to Decorating Your Historic Home for the Holidays. My name is Nicole Flynn. I am the Field Services Representative at the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. I am joined this evening by some of our Preservation Alliance staff, including Beverly Thomas, as well as from Strawbery Banke Museum, Veronica Lester, and Erik Wochholz. It is great to have you as a participant in our virtual gatherings presented by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization. This gathering is part of our ongoing and expanding work to help provide information to people like you who are caring for old homes, barns, and historic landmarks. We hope that you'll become a member if you're not already. Memberships help us save more community projects, advocate for preservation at the state and local level, and expand preservation toolbox so we can encourage more preservation investment. As you know, we are open for business, providing lots of assistance in new and old ways. Even a little support from you can help make a big difference. We are recording the session and will post for members and friends. Please know by signing into this session that we are considering that you have consented to be recorded. The program will last about an hour. This event is free, although we do encourage you to join the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance and Strawbery Banke Museum, or donate to support more programs like these. Today's presentation has been created by Erik Wochholz, Curator of Historic Landscapes at Strawbery Banke Museum. Tonight, we will learn how to brighten our historic homes for the holidays with decor ideas using natural ingredients, dried flowers, and fresh greens. Erik?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Happy holidays. Happy to be here to talk to everyone. So I like to keep my presentations pretty casual, so do not hesitate to put some questions into the comment section, and I can certainly get to those questions and explain your curiosities, questions. So this is a great picture here in the front of the presentation. This is actually one of our role players portraying Mrs. Goodwin in our Victorian mansion, the Goodwin Mansion. So you can see how extravagant we often decorate the inside of our houses. This year with safety protocols, most of the decor is outside, and those enhancements with lights. So very magical. Let's get started. So a few discussion themes that I'll certainly go through. A little bit of history I'm going to touch upon, but I'm really going to focus on really that creativity, inspirational aspects of holiday decor, certainly to inspire you at home. But I'll try to explain a few of those historical interpretations that allows us to really design our decor a little bit different as we decorate colonial homes, Victorian homes, modern homes. So we often display that change over time in our decor, you know, interpreting 4+ centuries at Strawbery Banke Museum. Certainly trade routes brought in quite a lot of different supplies to Portsmouth, so there's all sorts of that history making those connections. These are a few pictures depicting actual Portsmouth renderings. The Renaissance and rebirth certainly enhanced decor in early history. And a lot of the times we actually use art for inspiration. So if you're at home, you know, certainly in a modern or postmodern era, we're looking through magazines, we're looking through pictures these days, but don't forget about all the historical artwork that will also inspire you. If you notice up on the top here, this is an actual wreath in one of the Botticelli depictions, and we will often look at historical artwork to really get inspired beyond modern magazines and all sorts of periodicals. So consider that as well. Now, colonial period, this is our Sherburne garden, and we often will grow things in this colonial garden that we interpret to around 1695. So on the left, you'll see all sorts of different colors here. If you can notice, we've got borage here and calendula. And we certainly use all sorts of different flowers in the flower drying process, certainly with teams of volunteers as soon as things come out. So maybe next year you want to consider drying your own flowers for your decor, but a little bit too late at this point, as we all know. Now, let's get into a few examples that we do at Strawbery Banke. Now, on the right here, if you want to consider swags are probably one of the easiest things to start with when you're learning decor. Now, a swag can be vertical like this, up and down, or often at the top of doorways, or even smaller ones on the corners of doorways. Hopefully everyone can see my arrow where I'm pointing. This is just a good example of a door to kind of get you inspired at home. Consider swags inside too, but do consider putting natural decor that will resist the weather outside. And if you have any delicate decor, maybe considering that inside. For instance, maybe you dried lavender bundles, or maybe you had picked up from your vendor some supplies that you don't want to melt with the snow and the rain. So do consider the balance of what outdoor decor usually will sustain itself with rugged natural forage materials, evergreens and berries and cones. That stuff that's naturally still growing in the environment, as opposed to the delicate stuff that you'll often be able to have opportunities inside for more of that decor. You can see a wreath down here, all dried flowers, lavender, yarrow, artemisia, if you're familiar with artemisia, nice white foliage you can grow. We grow quite a bit of lavender and hang that upside down. And all the way on the left is one example of a vessel we use to depict colonial designs. So we often talk about arrangements, but often we forget about the change over time with different vessels. So this is earthenware or redware. So again, maybe you want to source some really cool vessels to create designs at home. The garden landscape, certainly symbiotic with decor. So what you're growing can certainly equate to what you put inside your home, if not sourcing things through vendors. Still rooms were very historical. Still rooms were associated with a lot of herbalism. So do consider making wreaths, swags, roping, along with those crops that you might be growing like lavender and rosemary and thyme. Very traditional things. Traditionally, not only in decor, but people were actually utilizing herbs, let's say in a wreath, and actually eating them or cooking with them. So we often make wreaths out of herbs, and we often display them very close to kitchens, as people would have done for decor and certainly ingredients. Okay, the nosegay, this is a really just good depiction. The nosegay or tussy mussy, there's many different interpretations of little bundles and a really easy way to enhance decor, side tables and all sorts of things inside. Sometimes we'll actually put bundles on the corners of doorways inside too. As you pass through, you'll see on the corners sometimes little swags or posies of these different flowers. Here are a few of our houses. Some things are already up currently. I took these pictures just a few days ago. And again, just to inspire you to kind of consider your foundation, your doorways, your fences, different positions. You can actually see we're setting up trees on the either side. This is again Sherburne House with the wreath on the door. We often put swags on this door, but we've kind of enhanced things this year. But do consider urns outside, maybe foliage coming out of that with berries and cones, and you can certainly enhance that outside decor just by adding greens and a few supplies. For those entranceways, certainly roping on fencing. So do consider all the things that you can decorate your house with on the outside.
Erik, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have an old question here I'm just seeing for the first time. Can you please define still room?
A still room reflected distillation. So an area where you were often making essential oils or extracting very basic things, but here in Portsmouth, most people were accessing those types of essential oils and things from the apothecary shops by the 19th century. So there were people making this stuff at home, but it really reflected to those areas of teaching herbalism. There was an apprenticeship program, for instance, here in Portsmouth early on, teaching people So a lot of oral history around that aspect of apprenticeship programs here in Portsmouth early on. That's a great question.
Thank you.
So yes, opportunities outside for lighting. I'm gonna get to a slide and talk about safety protocols, but do consider, certain positions for lights. A lot of lights are getting very modern and enhanced, certainly LED, that reduces heat when it comes to lights. So in the past, we've always had problems with, the risk of fire and certain things, but the technology when it comes to lights and lights that look like candles, for instance, is getting so good each day that, the caution is being diminished a little bit with technology. So do consider a few LEDs maybe to enhance your decor outside, but really a lot of the risk is inside, and I'll bring up a slide very soon on that. So this is one of the first videos just depicting a few picks. So if you're not familiar with picks, very similar to a nosegay or a tussie mussy, they're designed to be basically bundles of single flowers or multiple flowers that allows you to pick ingredients into outside roping, inside wreaths, outside wreaths, and it really makes the process really quick. We will give you access either to YouTube or a shared file. So if you want to revisit these videos, they are already on YouTube as well. Okay, just let me know if you have any questions, but it's basically using tape, using a pick. In fact, I have an example right here. This is zinnia, if everyone can see that. And it's literally just a flower taped to a little stick that you actually push in to evergreens, okay? Certainly at this point, maybe not everyone has dried flowers to utilize, but you can do this with cones, you can do this with berries, you can do this with foliage, for instance. Let's say you have a roping, it's all white pine or all arborvitae. Maybe you want to forage with your family in the woods or your yard and create little picks of maybe juniper with berries or holly with berries, and then pick that different evergreen into your roping. Creating that bundle of diversity in decor looks really, really cool as opposed to one single ingredient. So do consider utilizing multiple ingredients. This is the video on how to make a pick. I'm going to run real quick through this. This is dried flower process. Maybe by next year, we can do another program. That's an entirely different program. Quite a lot of skill to develop, but this is actually silica gel that we dry in. So these are the ingredients, if everyone can see that image. So a little bit of floral tape, a little bit of wire, and those are the picks. Sometimes online, you can find those picks with wire already on them, okay? This year, supplies were very low online, but you can simply attach wire to these large picks if they're too big. For instance, one caveat to these picks, inside, if you're protecting your banisters, your mantles, and you're using these picks, sometimes when you pick these wooden pieces through, you'll scratch your historic wood. So do consider that. So utilizing wire and picks and even nails and other things inside will scratch things. So do consider when you're putting up decor, it's all about historic preservation. Even vessels with water, we don't do that. So there's the risk of spilling and creating watermarks, all sorts of different preservation issues. So do consider that as well. A pair of pruners and certainly just supplies. That's basically all you need for the pick process, okay? I'm going to quickly show you the section that teaches you basically how to make a pick. Designing a little posy bundle, okay? So before you even use the pick, you're basically creating this in your hand, okay? And in the very end, I'll show you how to attach. Keep in mind, sometimes you want to orient things taller or lower, okay? Because this is large, I am going to try to float some of this so this large zinnia doesn't actually cover up this awesome status color. And again, everyone, you can do this beyond dried flowers. Just be creative with the process. Nothing is perfect. We're all different in creating these little posies on our own. We do this with cones, diversity, rose hips. When it comes to these winterberry that you can still find in a forest. Like putting various things inside, along with things that might be a little fast forward a little bit. Others, so they way against this green pick. Okay. Now we're going to use the floral tape to do that, okay? In a very simple process of basically starting at the top and working your way down with the floral tape. If people prefer wire, tying wire and attaching it onto the stem, you can certainly do that as well, but I do prefer floral tape. So let's get into that simple. Speed it up a bit, but you're basically just wrapping. Floral tape is a lot like plumber's tape. You just put a little pressure on it and it attaches. Really easy on the hands, as opposed to wire, a little trickier. Just a little speed up here. You can see I'm just wrapping, starting at the top and wrapping all the way down. And that's basically it. Okay, and then you just take out the excess wood. Okay, that's just a basic pick. And one craft that you can just get started with to really save time and effort through wreath making processes. Does really save a lot of time, but there's all sorts of different aspects of creating design. So this is just one layer, okay? So a lot of symbolism with art. Again, I'm not gonna get into too much history, but I'm fascinated with art. I used to be an art history minor in my first degree. And this artwork really reflects a lot of symbolism, but I'm not gonna certainly get into that. But again, utilizing artwork, I don't know if you notice the details of the arrangement on the left, but you know, the tulips and the dianthus, we often source our supplies or literally create our garden designs around what will preserve and go into our decor later in the holiday season. So very interesting process. Do consider there is a significant era of change over time with flower designs when it came to featuring a single type of flower in a vase. So do consider that inside when you want to just utilize small spaces, you know, on side tables, sometimes dining room tables, pairing with mirrors or artwork in your house. Small aspects of color upright like this is just beautiful and very simple. Sometimes simple goes a long way in the household, just with a single flower or a few of the same flowers. More artwork. I'm obsessed with these types of artworks. The Dutch masters, if you're familiar. Okay, so this basically depicts a lot of the ingredients that you can utilize for colonial plants. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Again, we'll share this information with all the attendees. The Baroque period really enhanced lots of curves in designs. So that certainly depicts kind of the outflow. You'll actually notice these days a lot of people will put gardens inside like a wheelbarrow and dump it out onto their lawn. That actually has a connection to the history of the change over time with decor. So you can actually see that those aspects in artwork long before people started to actually do that in their yards. So lots of life depicted in those types of artworks, and certainly that change and evolution of arrangements. I'm going to zip through a few of these historic aspects of decor. This slide really depicts the balance between controlling nature and letting nature go. So we often will do formal designs, which the Victorians loved, and very wild designs, which were more appropriate in early history with colonial designs, okay, with a lot of that Puritan influence and all sorts of different early history of foraging, and certainly again with the still rooms, with utilizing herbalism within decor, okay? So we often talk about that balance, certainly with interpreting landscapes with design as well. Again, kind of the depiction of the age of the florist, and certainly again, placing very small arrangements on tabletops, certainly just a few flowers. This depicts kind of the change as you see water in vessels in artwork. Very interesting history. I wish I can talk more about that, but we move on. Early flowers, again, vessels. We'll have you access these lists if you're inspired to really grow certain things for different designs. And you can certainly access our garden maps on our Strawbery Banke website if you're curious on exactly what we grow. 18th century Georgian design. This relates pretty close to our Chase house. If everyone is familiar with our Chase house at Strawbery Banke, we interpret late 1700s. And that really depicts a lot of formal designs. You know, before a lot of people were celebrating Christmas and other holidays, designs were more formal aspects of not really the decor we usually see today, but more basic, more formal. A few pictures coming up of that actual Chase house inside. So you'll get an idea, and you can certainly compare that to Victorian design, which was just exuberant and just overflowing with decor. So quite the dichotomy. And here we go. This is Chase. Perfect segue. So you can see on the right here is the dining room. And this brings up a few safety protocols with decor when it comes to candles. Okay. Now, believe it or not, Victorians loved putting candles into trees. And now you can actually find lights that look like candles. Please do not put real candles in trees, everyone. Trees are extremely flammable. Even sometimes the faux trees, sometimes even worse than real trees. So please be careful with lights, with candles, and fireplaces inside. So you just always want to consider safety. So the kissing ball over the dining room table, just assume maybe lighting these candles, maybe not a good idea. So just consider that, or maybe LED or faux candles, or if you have a high ceiling, maybe it's okay. So just do consider being safe. This is not exactly the front door, but the back door inside campus here. We changed the wreath design every year and put roping over the door. This would be an opportunity for lights as well. If you want to enhance your roping, do consider if you do not set up lights or a spotlight. Spotlights are really easy as opposed to putting up a lot of string lights, you know, creating those focal points, whether a spotlight directly to your door or a spotlight directly to the corner. Maybe you have an urn with foliage and berries coming out and overflowing at the corner of your house. Or candles in the windows. Very traditional. We do that every year, and that really enhances things. Maybe roping along the outside of your windows as well. Any type of enhancement, just get creative at home. You can actually see a swag up top as opposed to that other swag I showed you. This would be more a horizontal swag. Historical design, certainly depicting more larger designs than this. It is tricky to get them up. Do consider not only maybe attachment in the middle, but left and right as well. Just consider a snow load on one of these is going to pull it down almost immediately if it's not stable, okay? But do consider where you put your nails. If you have a historic house, we try to only put nails in specific locations that really don't affect the outside of the house very much. But again, sometimes you'll need 3 nails as opposed to just 1 in the middle. Sometimes you'll have an overhang here that protects, but sometimes not with historic homes, depending on what century. But we've lost many times these swags or wreaths just popping right off the houses. With snow load and wind and rain, all sorts of things. Inside, we decorate quite a bit with our dried flowers. Believe it or not, this entire wreath was grown at Strawbery Banke and put together by 2 volunteers. Great team of volunteers that we have, tremendous teamwork. 18th century, this is again a list, so you'll get access to this list. So I'm just basically depicting kind of the ingredients that changed over time. As breeders were coming out with different types of flowers, and certainly exploration and introducing new species that were exotic, maybe coming out of South America and Africa. So that change over time gave more and more people more opportunities to decorate with different flowers, and certainly reflections of people who had access to maritime trade and resources. The merchants certainly in Portsmouth had quite a bit of access to materials. So they were often making formal designs, but there are exceptions with people who did not have access to a lot of resources throughout time. The yellow rose, for instance, was a significant aspect of decor because yellow roses were very rare in early history. So there are many depictions in artwork when it comes to the yellow rose that was introduced quite a bit as breeding was evolving throughout history. We have a few at Strawbery Banke. More artwork, again, lots of inspiration. This is one of my favorite artists of all time. Again, part of the Dutch masters. Awesome. Another plant, another interpretive list here. I'm gonna just zip right through here. Again, more introductions, examples that you'll see once we share the file. Celia Thaxter, depicted in Charlotte Hassam's artwork on the right here out at Appledore. We collaborate quite a bit with that garden. So if you're not familiar, take a visit to Appledore Island. Unfortunately, it's closed this year. We're getting into the Victorian era here. So this is where most of the content that we have, since we have a lot of primary sources from the Goodwin family, we often have a lot of interpretation when it comes to the 19th century. And again, that's associated with the Goodwin mansion. Dianthus, for instance, this is again another depiction of introductions. Carnations, for instance, became very popularized, but certainly lots of different aspects of that family, Dianthus. Very, very cool plant, many different types that you can grow here in New England, very hardy, with a few exceptions. This is actually a depiction of an old greenhouse. This is a primary source image. The hothouse, our greenhouse, allows us to grow a few exotics, including orchids. Do consider displaying live plants. I think that's the reason I put this slide in. 19th century Victorian families often put live plants in their houses. Now, these days with historic preservation, we try not to do that with the risk of, water in our houses. But if you want, you can certainly approach kind of that style. Certainly orchids, for instance, bloom this time of year with a few exceptions, lots of different types of orchids. That's actually the largest family of plants in the world. So we do often display, if not without water, we often display the silk flowers that came into practice certainly during the 19th century more and more as people started to display silk flower arrangements, okay? So do consider that. If you don't want to put live plants, they are costly, but if you take care of them, silk flowers will last quite a long time and really easy to take care of because they're silk. All right, so safety protocols again. Oh, I wasn't familiar of doubling that image. So that's the same image I just showed you. But on the right here, again, Mrs. Goodwin in one of the parlors with the Christmas tree. So you can notice all the ornaments on the tree, including these posy holders. If you notice that little detail there. So posy holders were often metal and other types of materials in the 19th century, but these days you can actually buy or actually make little cones like this. This is actually created by one of our interpreters. I believe it was Sarah Reagan. We do a weaving workshop at Strawbery Banke, and we're making baskets. And I believe this was 2 years ago that we created these as ornaments. So do consider flowers and foliage and berries on your Christmas tree. or holiday tree, really any type of tree. You know, even outside trees, we sometimes will decorate with cones and berries, as you see in those previous pictures with lights outside. At the top, we've got a nice tree topper. So different interpretations of what goes on top of the tree, you know, from angels to stars to sometimes we'll make bouquets at the top of the tree. So really extravagant designs, really getting creative on those. Mantelpieces, consider that as well. Really easy way to kind of put color down above your fireplace. But again, be very careful with too much decor around your fireplace. And especially this tree, for instance, if this fire was going, this tree would not be here. It's too close. Okay, so do consider the proximity between your fireplace and your tree. Okay, I would suggest pretty far away. Just consider sparks will fly, you know, not only on carpet, but into that tree. It takes one spark to lit pretty much a tree. So be careful with that. All right?
Erik, what are those posy holders made out of?
That is a great question. I wish I knew. So I believe the education department buys in strips of a particular type of wood. So it's already in strips. So then they can just crank out by weaving different designs. My favorite is this large basket that was reproduced based on a picture, I believe, from the 19th century. So sometimes we'll actually research the styles and try to reproduce an image. And sometimes they come out really, really nice. But I wish I had a more specific answer because that's a great question. Maybe I can find out and let everyone know if you're curious.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And do notice the things that we put into those little posy holders. There's one authentic one coming up, an authentic posy holder. So this is again a depiction of what we often do in Goodwin. Again, the kissing ball idea. If you're not familiar with kissing balls, they were traditionally put up kind of like mistletoe. But if you're familiar with mistletoe, a lot of people don't use it anymore because it is an invasive species. So a lot of people use faux mistletoe or silk mistletoe. We try not to use invasive species in our designs because the seeds drop, they propagate themselves, and now there's all sorts of invasive species all around. For instance, bittersweet. We all think it's pretty, you know, it's out in the woods. It starts off a nice red berry and then it opens up and looks yellow. A lot of people will decorate with that and the birds will grab at it and it's everywhere. So do consider, you know, especially your outside decor. You'll notice maybe bittersweet growing in your garden the next year. This is Goodwin front door here. We often use faux fruit. We've tried real fruit before, and it's very tricky. For instance, if you get a warm spell, maybe a couple days of warm weather, the flies will start eating your fruit on the reef. It's pretty gross, so do consider maybe rugged faux fruit. A little tricky to get into wreaths. We often make picks with faux fruit. You just punch a hole into one and create this pick and then attach it into the wreath. Maybe tie it on the back, okay?
Erik, another question. Does mistletoe actually grow in New England?
Well, it's not supposed to, but I believe it does, but out west, not in this area. I've never seen it, but I do know it's an invasive species. It's a great question. I'm not sure what region it has established itself in, but it's not from here. It's a great question. You guys are stumping me. I love it. Right here is a very unique design that we often do. Do consider pressing leaves, pressing flowers. We use old phone books because I just don't understand why we still have phone books. We have stacks and stacks of old phone books, and we put flowers and leaves and foliage into them and label them. So one phone book is Queen Anne's lace. The other phone book is violet. So we just kind of pull them out. And this is a very easy design on cardboard. So it's literally a ring of cardboard. And we, naturally throughout history, people were making natural pitch with like pine sap and wood ash, natural types of glues. But we do, I'll admit, cheat every now and then with, just sticky glue. The sticky glue works the best. The sticks, that lots of kids like to use, works great with these types of wreaths. And it's literally a flat wreath. This is actually maple leaf. We sometimes do this with ginkgo leaf, and then dried flowers that have literally just been pressed in a book. Historically, people are using flowers as bookmarks, Bibles, literature, all sorts of different examples. And that's kind of how that type of preservation started, just by kind of keeping your spot in your book.
Erik, we have just about 7 minutes left before our question and answer section.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very quick through the rest of the slides so we can get there. So in process, this is what the volunteers do every year. Great team of volunteers. A few extra examples of what we have done in Goodwin. So quite the diversity, including this really cool bird cage. So do consider objects that you can decorate as well. Fireplace right next to it, of course. If there was a fire in there, probably not right next to the fireplace. Traditionally, arrangements were often put inside the fireplace if the fireplace was not active, but of course that was usually during the off season, the growing season, where people weren't really utilizing a lot of fires. Okay, this is a Create a Holiday wreath. Again, if we're going to a Q&A, that's fine. You guys will have access to these videos online. And this one's actually already, I believe, on YouTube. So if you have any questions, let's just dedicate those questions to Q&A specific on wreath making and all this stuff I'm kind of zipping through. Language of flowers, that's just more 19th century interpretation of the messaging behind certain flowers that were in decor. This was regional, so it could have changed, West Coast, East Coast, South, and North, depending on where you lived. On the right here is an authentic posy holder. So this is kind of similar to those ornaments I just showed you that were made at Strawbery Banke. This was often put on your body, whether on your waist or another location with flowers in them. So that was kind of an ornament for the body. Eperons are really cool and traditional. Often these were 2-level or 3-level designs, tabletop arrangements. Often traditional, this is mostly faux silk flowers, if not a few dried ingredients, but traditionally there was fruit at the base, often very close to common areas or dining room areas where you could literally eat off them. And that's how they started, not only with flowers and beauty, but actual edibles at the base that you can grab. Okay, more plant lists. Roping, this was created a couple of years ago for a modern art piece, but this is a good example, maybe some inspiration to create little sections of roping. I like these for centerpieces. So consider something like this. Maybe you bought roping, you cut it to size, and you place it in the center of your dining room table, if not an arrangement as a centerpiece. Sometimes we'll make small types of this and put them as place settings. So that's another very festive way at each seat. Okay, this is the roping video. Again, we'll give you access to these how-tos. This is the only one that's not yet on YouTube, but I'll certainly put it up very soon. All right. Modern design gets very creative. So beyond the history, this is actually the roping I just showed you on a model. This is Sarah. We did a really cool modern photography project a couple of years ago. So do consider going beyond these traditions, going past what we're familiar with when it comes to historical design, and just get fun and creative. All the way on the left is what we call ikebana. This is a Japanese style. And ikebana Really, really cool interpretation if you want to research that. It's all about negative space, okay? It gets a lot more complicated than that, but there's more symbolism behind it than what's obvious to the eye. So really cool stuff. This is a foraged wreath with mushrooms. Consider that as well if you're finding things in the woods this time of year. I love decorating wreaths with mushrooms. This is one of my favorite designs. Really, really cool. Flower drying, again, if you want to get inspired maybe next season to do some flower drying, we mostly use silica gel and hanging processes. Hanging, if you really just want to get started, easiest way. Just keep them cool, dry, and dark, okay? And we are at the end, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, any curiosities, questions that you have, everyone.
I have a question, Eric. This is Beverly. Using silica gel, how long, I know different flowers are different lengths of time, but on average, how long do they need to be in the gel?
Yeah, average with silica, I would say a month.
Okay.
It's all about water content. So generally, if we think, delicate things don't take a long time to dry because they have barely any water to like delicate petals.
Mm-hmm.
But things that are more thick and rugged, obviously that's going to take a longer time. And practice, you'll just get familiar with what takes longer. And sometimes you can just peel, just kind of dig under. So you literally submerge the flower underneath the silica gel. So it's usually at least 1 to 2 inches. And sometimes you can just kind of look to see, but it's often kind of a tester, trial and error. You'll make a few mistakes, but that'll certainly teach you what not to do and certainly teach you those skills, absolutely. You can recycle silica gel too. So a lot of people are a little hesitant with the amount that you often need. So we'll often just have enough in like a very deep Tupperware jar, really wide, so we can get kind of single petals upside down all the way around as much as you can. But you can recycle the silica gel. You don't have to kind of buy it constantly. If it absorbs too much moisture, you can actually bake off that moisture in the oven and then utilize it again. But it takes a couple years, couple seasons of drying at least to get to the point where you have to actually bake off the moisture. But don't consider that you have to buy a whole bunch of silica gel every year.
We have a couple questions in the chat. June T is asking if you have a suggestion for a second floor porch.
Second floor porch. Is it exposed? So can you see it from ground level?
June, if you want to unmute, you can answer that. She says you can see it from ground level. She said yes.
So I would suggest certainly lights. If there's a railing, roping, sometimes we'll suggest swags coming down. So if you've like for columns or sections of the railing, or almost like bows at certain sections of the railing with the lights, hanging baskets are another really cool way to decorate an upper deck. If you've got the hooks, don't consider actually growing anything in the hanging basket, but an empty hanging, almost iron or metal hanging basket just as a vessel, and then putting foliage inside and allowing it to kind of fall out. If you can see that from ground level, it's going to look absolutely gorgeous. Do consider putting lights in each hanging basket, because if ideally sometimes we want to actually see not only during the day, but at night, this decor. It's not just about decorating, during the day, but the lights really enhance things at night. So I would actually consider that, or at least suggest that. What else? Sometimes you can actually put a wreath on the external side of your porch railing. So it's exposed to that, public perspective, so you're putting it literally on the outside of your railing. I'm just kind of assuming. I've actually got an upper porch behind me, behind my condo here. I'm just kind of visualizing that one, but I'm just, again, assuming what the porch looks like. But hopefully that kind of inspired a few ideas. Yeah, hopefully I answered the question.
Okay. We have one from our staff member, Maggie Steer. You didn't mention holly. Was it used in New England? And what about cones?
Yeah, holly was very traditional. We have put quite a lot of holly in our decor, mostly our swags and a few wreaths. But my apologies if you didn't see an image. I may have forgotten that. So just so everyone is aware, you have to have a male and female holly to get the berries. So if you are wanting to establish holly within your landscape, you can do that, but you'll need both types, to be able to pollinate themselves in order to get the fruit. So do consider that. We will often buy in holly, unfortunately, because we don't actually grow it currently on site. So that's certainly what I would suggest. Either sourcing it from a local vendor. Sometimes you can find it foraging, but it's really difficult. Sometimes you can actually find the remnants of old gardens, or at least the remnants of those. But yeah, it's a little tricky when you can't find it or you're not growing it. So I would suggest sourcing it through a vendor. But yes, we certainly put it into decor as it is very traditional.
Before we present the next question, could you just expand a little bit on, if you're foraging, how you should gather those materials?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people get in trouble when it comes to foraging. They go into private property and the owners sometimes get a little frustrated. This time of year, it happens a lot because everyone wants to, save a little cost and go out there. So I would suggest certainly sourcing out conservation land, public easement. If everyone is familiar with public easement, anything below like utility lines is public. So those are often very safe havens for foragers. It's not very luxurious to forage on the side of the road, but often it will reduce the risk of approaching private property. But there are caveats to this. Often foragers will ask property owners to forage their land. Sometimes they're perfectly fine with that, sometimes not. But if you ever get into a situation where you're not sure, just knocking on someone's door, if it's feasible enough, a little tricky during the health precautions these days, but I'm sure, a little wave on the public sidewalk, maybe someone's doing their lawn or something. Can I forage in the back swamp here? Just want to grab a few, winter berries, but just do be concerned with the division between private and public property, because it gets a little tricky sometimes. I often love, I'm not sure where everyone is living on the program today, but I often will go into College Woods in Durham, or Adams Point in Durham, or public easement along 236, and all sorts of different areas that over the years I've just become familiar with. And the talk of the town, often people relating to foraging will often have these spots already picked out, and hopefully they'll share their secret spots. One other caveat to end that point, I do suggest, if you're foraging, please don't take all of what you find. This is often how things disappear. And this is why a lot of foragers will keep their locations secret, because you can just imagine, let's say I discovered this very cool spot of just an amazing stand of winterberry. if I tell everyone about it, it's likely not going to be there next year because everyone's going to take it all. And it requires a little bit of that seed to rejuvenate itself. So when I find a good stand, I'll actually just take a little bit of it, and that really just rejuvenates things. So just be sustainable.
Yep, and just be careful foraging on conservation land. Some places don't allow foraging on them, but you can usually find information about public lands that do allow sustainable foraging.
And be very careful with hunters, everyone, because foragers and hunters will often mix, you know, so be very cautious and familiar with the hunting season.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. Is there a time period in which cornucopia is more appropriate than others, like the federal, or is it a colonial revival thing? This is from History Alive Incorporated.
So the Federalist period is, for our interpretation, certainly associated with a lot of architecture, but that chase example, that 18th century, that's the Federalist period, which is very close to our Aldridge garden and house that we often depict colonial revival. So it is specific to a period. So we often will not just kind of spread that type of interpretation out. It's focused. Usually when we are in normal operations, this is again, this change over time that we try to depict. Normally our houses are open with the decor inside and out. As people go into each and every house, they'll see different types of decor, whether it's the interpretation of the architecture that we'll see, but often equating to the decor during those eras that they would have made in comparison to, let's say, Victorian design or actual colonial design. Colonial revival, the Federalist period will often have its own type of design to really depict those differences. So we do what we can. Colonial revival is a little tricky with the Aldridge house. We're working on that new interpretation, but the formal aspect of the designs in chase are very appropriate. That actually used to be a children's hospital. Lots of history associated with that house. So I can go on and on. Hopefully that answered your question. So yeah, particular to a certain time period, that type of interpretation when it comes to decor.
Terry Cook made a comment that Winterberry only produces berries on old wood. So that's important to know.
Thank you, Terry.
Cut it back too much.
So I hope everyone understands that point, because that's a huge point. So lots of things emerge every year from old wood. A lot of people want to just cut that all the way down, thinking that it's just going to merge again. So that's a great point. If you cut it all the way down to, let's say, the crown or root system, taking too much, it's literally going to take another 10 years probably to get up to the point where you're taking the berries off. So just cut them at the top when it comes to old growth. It's a great point. Holly is the same way, a few other things. So yeah, just don't take it all the way down. You're going to spend another decade growing it back up if you're doing your own growing.
Do you have
dogwood is another one. We just put that in, all sorts. Sorry.
That's okay. Do you have any suggestions for doing fresh floral displays?
Yes, in fact, I have a few props here. I'm not on camera anymore, but I do have a few props if anyone is interested.
I can pin your video again.
Because I do have a few modern aspects of design that will help everyone, especially with keeping fresh flowers alive inside your house.
I spotlighted your video if you want to show things.
Oh, I can't see myself, so I'm just assuming people can see me. Does everyone see me?
Yep.
Yep.
So is everyone familiar with Oasis? So this is a foam product. They often call it floral foam. Everyone see that?
Yes.
So this actually comes, Oasis is actually a brand. You can actually find a lesser version of this. It's not as great, but you can still use it to actually hydrate. So this block is basically a hydroponic block that you can keep your indoor live fresh arrangements alive for at least a few weeks without actually watering them, depending on your heat inside. So you basically soak this for a few hours, sometimes overnight if you really want to get super wet. It absorbs quite a bit of moisture, and you literally prep a few holes. You know, fresh flowers bend really easy. They snap really easy. They're not as sturdy as a lot of, you know, woody foliage that you find in the forest. But if you prep little holes, you can do it this way too. You can actually stick live plants into the block, and it'll actually hydrate those live plants for at least a few days. You might have to just rehydrate the block. But for instance, everyone see this vase here?
Mm-hmm.
You can cut these to size. So obviously this is not going to fit in here, right? This stuff will almost cut like butter, okay? And then you can size it to a vessel like this for inside. You can stabilize it maybe with some tape over the top. I sometimes just use like green tape to stabilize the block inside, and then pick in live materials, okay? All sorts of different vessels to consider, but the great thing is you can cut this down to size. You can see some of these actually have cross sections here, and I'll actually do this. I'll just, maybe not. Anyways, if you just cut this, it'll snap right off. And sometimes you can just get perfect little blocks, but really easy to size it. Water is the issue. Certainly with historic preservation, you can use vessels and just put water in them. But this allows you to really kind of utilize some modern techniques, and without the risk of vessels leaking or you having to fill up vases. Sometimes when you need to rehydrate this, you can literally pop out the entire arrangement and have just like a tub with water, set it in and just let it kind of wick up, and then put it back in your vessel.
Yeah. They even make wreath versions of that. So they'll have the foam attached to the wire so you can.
Absolutely. So that's a very clever way to actually, yes, hydrate a wreath. So it's basically a ring with the same product, full circle. I almost forgot to mention, they come in tree sizes too, or cones. And this is a this is just a fun way to, you know, especially with kids and families, just to get together. You actually pick like holly, berries and foliage, sometimes juniper and other things, and you create this little mini tree. And same kind of theory, that mini tree could just sit in a tub and rehydrate and wick up. But really, really clever little decor for tabletops and all sorts of things. So do consider that as well.
All right, Eric, we're just about at the 1 hour mark. Do you want to share any other last minute information about Strawbery Banke with everybody?
Absolutely. So Candlelight Stroll, which starts next week, is unfortunately sold out. So with the challenges this year, we've done pre-registration, and that's sold out pretty quickly, just trying to bring in a select few to, you know, keep capacity safe for everyone. But luckily there's a waiting list if anyone is interested in getting on that waiting list. But luckily the ice skating rink is open. You know, the LaBrie family skate at Puddle Dock Pond is an amazing opportunity this time of year. We've got the music going, plenty of families out there currently, literally right now on the ice. So do consider coming to the ice skating rink. It's a lot of fun. You can actually see the lights and decor all the way around the rink. So it's a lot of fun if you are interested. We're certainly developing lots of programs at Strawbery Banke, getting ready for next season, lots of learning opportunities, and we will continue to feature lots of engagement online throughout the winter, just like this program.
Well, thank you very much, Erik. I would like to just thank everyone. I'm just pulling up my notes for the closing. Thank you so much for participating in today's session. I especially want to thank Erik Wochholz for his wisdom and sharing his expertise with us. Also, Beverly Thomas, who helped moderate the chat. We will be sending a follow-up email with links to help inspire your decorating, as well as a survey to help us plan other programs. Please keep the Preservation Alliance healthy by making a donation or renewing your membership. 80% of our funding comes from people and groups like you. Our work, Preservation Alliance and yours, is even more important than ever as a respite connection to community and longevity, and as fuel for economic recovery. Our next session is this coming Tuesday, Community Preservation Projects, Effective Strategies. That will be on Tuesday, December 8th at noon. If you are interested in that, you can email me, nf@NHpreservation.org. The information's on our website as well as our Facebook page. And we want to wish you all well, and most of all, wish your family good health. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good evening.